So yeah, the hero's journey. I find interesting is like a lot of people point to Star Wars. I know in some colleges and stuff they use Star Wars as like a teaching aid to show how you can use archetypes and the hero's journey to create a story. I mean that's
Okay.
essentially what George Lucas did. Went to film school, they talked about archetypes, the hero's journey, and he literally hit every beat of it as he went through it. So like RTD2 and C3PO is the comic relief. Luke, the ordinary boy, suddenly steps into a much bigger world. In fact, even Obi-Wan says that you've taken your step into a much larger world.
Yeah.
And he becomes his mentor, the wise old man. And then you have the literal evil empire and Vader as its attack dog, which are all parts of the whole hero's journey thing. And even the Force itself, it's this thing that the hero must learn to overcome whatever it is that he has to fight. And Obi-Wan's there to guide him through that. It's kind of neat because there's several movies over the years. Finding Nemo even fits into it. The Matrix, Harry Potter, all have that idea of the hero's journey and have specific characters that play the parts. Lord of the Rings, you have Frodo, right? And his sidekicks are the other hobbits. You have the wise old man, which is Gandalf, who's literally a wise old man. And you have the very clear villain, Sauron. You have the what they call the shapeshifter. That's Gollum. And you also have your comic relief, again with the hobbits, especially Merry and Pippin,
Mhm.
right?
Those traditional archetypes of how to create a story that's interesting, that
Mhm.
captivates an audience, and that has different layers to satisfy different roles.
Yeah. I mean, they're archetypes for a reason. They're common. Some people use the term Judeo-Christian. It's more fits in that because a lot of the writing fits into those things that come from more ancient writings that are in those cultures specifically. Because if you go over to like say Eastern storytelling, it's a lot different, especially with a lot of polytheism and stuff like that. Those archetypes are a little different, archetypes rather. But it's
Yeah.
kind of neat how many different movies just follow the same formula. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, and with that, welcome to Legends of the Tabletop, our podcast. Today we are going to be going over the idea of world building in Dungeons and Dragons. I am going to be your host, Jonathan, and today I have with me,
Jonathan. Yeah, they have the same name.
yeah, the two Jonathans. Jonathan isn't always on our table, but he is always in the background doing all of the things no one else wants to do. And one of them is helping us do some world building in Novamir. So
Yeah.
my hat's off to you because
Thank you.
without your creativity and your insight and input, the Novamir campaigns not yet at least, the Novamir one shots that we've been doing on Legends of the Tabletop would not be possible. So my idea was today get you on the podcast and we can talk about what world building looks like for Legends of the Tabletop, how we go about it, and kind of like that process. Because we were talking a little bit beforehand and you said your process is a certain way and my process is completely different,
Mhm.
and so not everyone's going to have those same steps in the same order. It might be the
Yeah.
same steps, not necessarily in the same order, but we all are hoping to get to a final product that is enjoyable for a D&D table to consume. Yeah, so welcome to the podcast. I'm
Thank you.
super happy to have you on today.
Happy to be here.
My really funny thing that I keep to myself is I think we are two different sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
Like we have very similar things, but we approach it from completely different aspects.
Yeah.
And so we were saying that's like a good thing, right? Is to
Oh
have
yeah.
not the same mindset when you're trying to do a project. And for a lot of times we as human beings seek out likeness. We want the thing that's exactly like us so that we can feel comfortable.
Mhm.
And I don't think we're the same exact thing, but it works out really well.
Yeah, I was saying before how well we just work together when we make stories because a lot of the things that I think up of, you have either an opposing view or a way that it can be different that I haven't even remotely thought of, especially when it comes to D&D and a lot of the rules and things that are in the nitty gritty of it. Even when we were,
Yeah.
yeah, go on, sorry.
No, go ahead,
I
please.
was just saying, even like when we were talking about how we approach it, it's like you said, it's like same coin, but two different sides, two different approaches, and we somehow end up in the same place most of the time.
I remember Jonathan and I have known each other for a very, very long time. And I can remember being, I'm a couple years younger than you. And I remember you and I playing Legos together, and you would create these stories and these worlds. And I would just be enthralled and just consumed by like what was going on in your head as far as content and characters and the way that certain civilizations would work. And I was always impressed by that. And now later on in life, I get the opportunity to tap into your brain again and to be able to see you work through that. So thinking of world building from a D&D perspective and what I ask of you,
Mhm.
can you tell me like what's the process for when I say, "Hey Jonathan, I have this idea of creating our own D&D world and creating a campaign or one shots for people to play in." Where do you go first?
I know we were talking about this and found it interesting that I like to go to a story first. So I think of a character in some kind of setting with some kind of goal and basically write a story for myself and how they went through it. So I can get like, you know, what they see, what they hear, what they smell, what it feels like around them. And then from there, it just kind of blossoms out. Okay, now they're going to go to a town. So now I got to make a town. They're going to interact with these people. So now I got to make these people to interact with. And it just kind of just grows, for me, grows out that way, almost organically, to filling in the rest of it. And then once I kind of get that little nugget of a start, I can then start looking at the big picture and just backfill everything to meet up to that. Usually that's basically the what goes on in my head most of the time.
That's awesome. Um, for a D&D world, is there anything different that you have to think about and weigh instead of just writing like a normal story? You know, a normal story you can say Bob says X and Jane says Y and Tony says Z and it all makes sense.
Mhm.
Is that the same thing that you try to do with D&D? Because now that you're adding, you know, other people's input, they might not say the thing that you want them to
Yeah.
say to get you to Y
I
or
think
Z.
Yeah, I think there's 2 great examples of that. Is, one, which we were talking about, it's a specific character who I won't get into the details because it's gonna be part of the overall thing eventually, but a character whose wife died, and that was his, the drive with all the bad things he was doing, and you're like, "Well, he could just there's this in D&D to revive her. He could bring her back. Why would it be so hard?" So,
Yeah.
having to think about
Resurrection. Did
Yeah.
she die more than 100 years ago? Because if not, we got it.
Yeah, exactly, and that's so I'm trying to so I have to sit here and think, "Okay, I need to not go around the rules, but work within them that
Mhm.
would make something not work." Like, maybe she died in a specific way where they can't. It's like there's because of the way she died, there was no resurrection for her. And so he has to come up with something different. And this is causes him to do these bad things. And I think that being able to actually with those complications, I enjoy it even more because now I can think even more out of the box or have more creative input to change it so it would work the way I want. One of the big things is that I have a hard time with is sometimes thinking the really crazy ways players will do things on the table.
Yeah.
And this is actually from our one shot we recently had. That was the Monster of Pelham Way.
Oh, yeah. The one I ran.
Yeah, that
Mhm.
one was interesting because, at the end, uh, the way I imagined it to go is that the players would stop, quote, unquote, "the bad guy," and the portal that he opened at the end. By the way, go watch it. It's awesome.
Yeah, you're just all the spoilers are
Yeah,
happening right
yeah,
now, people. So
yeah,
if you
yeah.
haven't, uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
spoiler territory right now. But
go watch it. It's a pretty good one shot to watch, and
yeah.
then come back and we're gonna continue with the spoilers.
Without getting too much deal with it, they needed to close that portal, but one of the players dropped a fireball in the room and burnt everything to a crisp. So
Which you should expect.
so yeah, I was
If you have
thinking
a
like
party
that.
over level 5, you
Yeah.
have to okay, we have fireball.
Yeah, and I didn't expect someone to be that reckless to just nuke the room in one shot.
You know we're playing D&D, right?
Yeah, yeah, I
Okay.
get that.
Okay.
But sometimes like I think too logically.
Yeah, you're like, this is a 40 by 50 room. They're not going to
Yeah.
drop a fireball in it.
Yeah,
Yes,
they're
we
not
are.
gonna do that. Nope, yep, they are. So there was a really easy fix to that one. Instead of having an ancient scroll, it now is a stone tablet in the finished story. They
Yeah.
can't burn stone. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's one of the things that I think I have issues with when writing for D&D specifically is that real wild card stuff that players can do. And you're really good at thinking like that. Like the most insane thing a player would do and giving me a way to ground that or okay, I need to come up with a solution for that in case they do that. And I
Yeah, I mean, I'm just an unstable character on any table anyways. So I'm just telling you what I would do in game. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's hard for someone who thinks more of in a narrative because I think I
Yeah.
tend to think more of
Yep.
a narrative than in specific beats happening. And I don't want to use the R word, because people get upset when you say railroading. But I do believe that if you are trying to tell a story and you're trying to get your players involved, I don't see what's wrong with steering them a little bit. You tell them, the bad guy is in this village. You need to go to this village to find something. Having them go to the other side of the continent just because they want to get a rare ale is going to derail everything. Now, that
Yeah.
could be fun in itself, especially with these one shots. A lot of times, because the way we write them, they're written with time constraints or they're written for a certain level of player and a certain amount of players. And that's a little more difficult because you almost got to keep the story moving in a specific direction so that you can tell the story. If not, I don't think it would be as interesting. It'd be fun.
Yeah, I mean, if you're writing a one shot, you kind of want to complete it in one sitting.
Yeah.
That's the idea of a one shot. So if you have your characters being able to, like you said, hey, there's a trinket that I want, or I want to go get an ale that's somewhere else, and you're as the dungeon master trying to acquiesce for those requests, you're going to use up your time in a way that might not be as productive to complete your story. So yeah, there might be some steering, we'll call it that, by the dungeon master, and you need to provide that as a writer. Is how do you make sure that you give them enough information so that they continue to push that story forward? So one of the things I think is really important is the players knowing, hey, we're going to go do a thing on purpose. So like, hey, we want to go do a heist, and somebody says, let's go get drunk at the tavern first. Yeah, we can spend 15 minutes in real time grabbing a drink at the tavern real quick. But if you want to go to the tavern and then pick a fight with 3 people and then go try to seduce the bar wench, then we're taking the story to a place where it can't go because we don't have enough time. You have to have good DMs, but also when you're writing the story, you also need to really put in and I wouldn't want to say overwhelmingly obvious clues, but you do want to say, like that little arrow that's pointing, go this way. You kind of want to help your character get to that next spot. And so I feel like you do a really good job at driving the story forward. Just for the home listeners, John and I will write one shots together. And what normally happens when we write a one shot is I say I need a one shot, and then I give you a location, and then I would kind of let you go. come back in a few days and tell me where we're at. And then, like you said, I will throw my little monkey wrenches in your story, and then you work those out. But for the most part, when we get together, it is, hey, I need them to do this thing. And then
Mhm.
you say, well, you have this person say this, and you have this place, you have a clue that leads to this place, and then you
Yeah.
have another clue that leads to your final destination. And you do a really good job at that, is writing a story that gives direction. So I applaud you, and I thank you, because sometimes when we do our one shots, it is with a like a 3 hour to 3.5 hour time limit.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great thing about like doing one shots, is someone's thought this through for you so you can do it in a reasonable amount of time and still have like a very high level of fun.
I
Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's interesting that you say that because of working with you now, I have been putting a lot of DM notes in as you go through, or even having more blocks of dialogue for the DM to say if they choose to do so. I think that kind of helps the DMs, especially with certain motivations, like the tip of the iceberg, the character descriptions. That one shot was a live play that was done. Those motivations for those characters, if the DM took the time, when the DMs take time rather to read through those and see why does this character act like this, or if the characters are going to interact with this character, here's their little bit of blurb about their personality, where they came from, who they are, what drives them. And I think that makes it a lot easier for the DM to say,
Mhm.
okay, you're talking to this person, but they're very snobbish and they don't want to talk to you. And they know why. At least in the DM's mind. He knows why. And it makes it easier for him to do his job. And
Right.
I think that's one of the things you've taught me is like, how do I make the DM's job easier? And
Yeah.
that's about the only way I could think of. Is just give him some notes.
Yeah, making a DM's job easier is always helpful, because there are so many things that they're going to try to get through that their players are going to make difficult for them.
Mhm.
That them having like a clear thought process of the overarching story is so helpful.
One thing that I do, and I almost feel it's repetitive, but I think it needs to be stated every time, is the world you're in. Having that little description of saying, because you're going to have a player ask, well, what's this town smell like? You know, or what does the ale they make here taste like? Those extra details rather. It's nice to have those in the description to let people know, okay, this is the village. This is what it looks like. This is what roads are made like. This is what the architecture, the general architecture of the buildings are like. These are the kinds of boats and the little docks they have there on the water,
Yeah.
all that stuff. I mean, for me, I like it because that's just I like that detail from my own thinking. So I can have that world basically be real in my head, and that hopefully that gets translated somewhat onto paper.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that thought process. I love there are a couple of live play D&D groups that we both enjoy to watch.
Hmm.
And one of the things that you look for in a great DM is their description of where their characters are,
Hmm.
because it makes it more real to you. Like, you can sit there and say, yeah, I can smell like that smell of fish, the fresh fish in the fish market. If you describe it to me correctly,
Hmm.
I can hear, the seagulls yelling, crying out as you walk down the docks. I can see, the shady person in the corner of the tavern keeping an eye on us while we have our conversation, if you can describe it properly to me,
Hmm.
which gives me more buy-in in the world that I'm in and interacting with.
Hmm.
You had talked about, how you start writing and what you think of. Are there inspirations that you've always tried to pull from when you do your writing, or is it, just I wake up and I'm inspired?
I think a little of both, but I do have a lot of inspiration. There's several writers that I've loved over the years and read a lot. Some of the bigger guys. I tend to gravitate more towards science fiction. We were talking about this at one point that it may be controversial to some people to hear this, but science fiction and fantasy are basically the two sides of the same coin again, to use the same analogy.
Mhm.
And Arthur C. Clarke is one, Isaac Asimov. The way they tell stories, the amount of detail they put into things. A lot of writers that use a lot of character driven narrative. Peter David's another one that I really love. I had grown up reading a ton of his Star Trek books, and he actually wrote for I believe he did write some comic books for Marvel as well. For DC. Superman. No, yeah. He did also the Fantastic Four, so he did do Marvel and Spider-Man. That's right. He did some of Spider-Man writing as well. What I think is cool about him is his writing tends to have that heavily character-driven narrative. I like when the characters drive the story, when they make what's happening more real for the people invested to the story. So, like for instance, if you talk about it in a D&D setting, the
Mhm.
NPCs that people are going to interact with, rather, they should feel real. They should have somewhat realistic motivations. One note characters are kind of boring. The tip of the iceberg. I kind of fell in love with a few characters, and I'm definitely going to keep them around and use them in more stories because I just fell in love with the characters, and especially Alara, the warlock. Been I've been just expanding her backstory like crazy in my head just because I want her to be a complex character and I like her. She may be completely evil, but she is an interesting evil person.
Mhm.
I think, and even for the opposite end of the spectrum, some of the good guys, give them motivations for being the way they are. And I think that's one of the things that I try to go for, because a lot of these writers that inspired me, even movies and TV shows that have certain characters, it's like, man, I really like this character. I'm not going to outright copy it, but they would definitely inspire the idea for somebody else, like something in their personality I really liked. And I kind of draw from that sometimes. Even people I know, for that matter, just something in their personality that I find quirky or interesting will end up in one of my characters.
That's an interesting thing from a writing perspective is wanting to write interesting characters. How do you leave it where your NPC is driven and interesting, but still enough that your actual players have the agency and the ability to outshine your NPC? Because if I'm on a table, I love a great NPC,
Hmm.
but I also want to be bigger than the NPC is. So like I want to feel that the NPC is important, but I still how do you make it so that the player still feels they're more important than the NPC? Or that they're invested enough into the NPC story
Hmm.
that they're going to help.
I think you hit the nail on the head. The players are the heroes of the story, good or bad. They're the heroes, they're the focus. So your NPCs can't be, Superman and Wonder Woman, but they can be somebody a little more grounded that's still very much a hero, like Spider-Man. He's a little more of a, where they call him the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, right? So he's a more grounded everyman hero. And I think that's kind of what I like to do, is they're never going to overshadow the players. The players should always have front and center stage. So you tell them, like, for instance, you got to meet Andrea Felspar, and there's a massive backstory for her, but you don't know it when you first meet her. You just see her as this enigmatic elf who interacts with the players for a short time and moves on. And it's within her character too. You get I think the players could even get that, especially when you did that one and you DM'd her. I thought perfectly, like you captured her personality. That's another thing too. The better the DM, the better the characters you write come out.
Mhm.
And Alex does that really well too, who does our regular campaigns, and the Arabelle, rather. The one he did recently, I loved it. That fish lady, with that
Oh
funny
yeah,
voice he did.
absolutely.
That was a fantastic character that he came up with. You know, she was quirky, she was interesting. That
Mhm.
voice that he did, that really brought that character to life. And you're just like, what? You know, when you first heard her talk.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember. It's the Solo movie from Star Wars.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
There's a character in it that's in the like she stays in the shadows
Hmm.
because
Not.
that's the kind of feel I had for that character that Alex had created.
Hmm. Oh
And
yeah, the gang leader thing in
yeah,
the very
yep,
beginning. Yeah, I know
yep.
you're talking about. Yeah, yeah.
And that's the feel I had envisioned for this lady, which this like kind of shady underworld leader boss that, was running some stuff. And I really enjoyed that character.
Hmm.
And that gives you the buy-in, right? As the player,
Hmm.
is to interact with that portion of the world and see where that story develops.
Hmm. Yeah, I think I'm trying to use characters that we've already used to kind of not do any spoilers. But a good example is the cobbler from the Monster of Pelham Way, who basically
Okay.
is the gives the adventure or whatever to the he's like the main contact NPC for the players at that time. It's funny. I don't think anybody caught the joke with his name. That's the only thing that kind of made me sad.
I would say this, leave it alone and see if someone
Yeah,
ever figures it out.
yeah,
It's like it's Easter eggs. And
yeah.
you just leave them out there. Somebody will figure it out. But now
But
that you've said it,
yeah,
that's out of the bag.
I see if anybody else picks it up. But I what I liked about him is he was just supposed to be like the kind of like the representative of the neighborhood, so to speak. But he was like this humble little cobbler that
Mhm.
all he wanted to do is make his shoes and mend shoes in peace. That's his life. And I think having it as simple as that made him an easy character to use. And
Yeah, I mean,
mhm,
I I love a simple NPC every once in a
mhm,
while because you're going to have like the complex NPC that's driving huge stories
mhm,
and maybe for campaigns and you're going to have 15, 20 interactions with this person, you need that depth. But
mhm,
for a one shot, just having like a very simple, straightforward, hey, I'm the everyday working man that's just like trying to get by and we need your help. It was a very simple role to play, but still impactful and still gets your party to invest in helping them out.
mhm. Yeah, I
And
love.
gold always helps as well.
Yes, always.
Oh,
Uh, Actually, one of my favorite characters is the one you came up with, the Minotaur from Venice.
Manouche man.
Yes, I love him. That voice, man, the way you acted it out. And again, that goes back to the thing with it's kind of like the same principle as an actor can only have a role as good as the script.
Yeah.
And uh, when a DM has something good like that to use, it's easy. It's easy to make that memorable character that stands out, but again doesn't overshadow anything.
Yeah, I say that a lot when I DM is I want, and it's a little bit different than I think other people DM. I want to be over the top,
Hmm.
but have less airtime.
Hmm.
So when I bring in my character, I want my character to be memorable and be like, oh my goodness, that guy had a lot of energy, or oh, that person was weird. But we only saw them or only interacted for 3 or 4 minutes. And then I try to at least turn the spotlight back on my players. And I think that's a great way to DM because
Hmm.
you do want memorable players, but you don't want them to take over the table.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that it's sticking with the topic on inspirations, I
Mhm.
think especially the time period that basically both of us grew up in, a lot of the pop culture that shaped our generation really kind of spills over, I think, into the writings. I mean, because you may notice that a character is definitely inspired by something from Star Wars
Yeah. Yep.
or Back to the Future or, any of those really popular old movies. I say old. Actually, they are old now, aren't
They
they?
are
They
old,
keep they
actually.
keep
Yeah.
keep thinking they're only, 10, 15 years ago, and like 30, 40 now. I think it's neat to have those references. And
Mhm.
what I find fascinating is I will sometimes sit with my daughters, especially my youngest. I'll sit and watch some silly cartoon she's watching with her. And there'll be a funny thing that happens. And I'll look at her and I said, "Do you even know what that funny thing came from?" She goes, "No, they just did it." It's like, "No, that's from an old movie."
Mhm.
And it's funny that those jokes, basically, it's our people our age that are writing these shows. So those
Oh yeah, absolutely.
things get in there, and I think even with our writing, it's something similar. I'll see some characters that are, maybe came from Star Trek or any other of those really popular shows from back then.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
that like one of the first conversations we had when I was pitching you Novamir and it was named something completely different.
yeah.
um I had a spreadsheet and I said, here are the people that I've populated into this world, and it would be a name, and then it would be and then and the next column would be where I'm pulling their personality from, and it would
Mhm.
be like Jedzia Dax or
Yeah.
you know Kramer from Seinfeld. And
Yeah.
it's just like, because those personalities are so strong and so
Mhm.
familiar for us, that I can say, "Hey, I'm going to take a elf woman, but I
Mhm.
want you to play it as Kramer."
Mhm.
And so you make those slight adjustments in the person, but
Mhm.
it's the personality behind it that's driving the character. And
Mhm.
then we really can like hone into how we act out that person, and it's fun.
Mhm.
And like you said, like their inspirations, we're not going to pull 100% from them,
No.
but
Yeah.
you have an idea of the quirks of that person, or the
Yeah.
mannerisms. Do they have like a slight stutter? Do they have a twitch in their hand, or one of the things that you think of anyone? I'm going to just pick some random person. I'm just going to pick Jerry Seinfeld.
Okay.
Um, you,
Mm.
you say, I want a Jerry Seinfeld like character.
Mhm.
And then you're like, so what is he known for? And he's like, well, he has like those observational humor.
Yeah.
So then, like, your character just, every once in a while just points out something that's so obvious to everyone, but looks at it in just a slightly different way. And you can get that personality down. So
Yeah.
I love inspirations like that. And I love working especially with you, because like you said, we grew up in the same time period,
Mhm.
so we have a lot of the things that we can look towards to each other and kind of know where the other person's going with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love when that happens with us where we both like instantly lock in on the same, that same idea with just one simple little reference.
Hmm.
It makes it such a nice shortcut for things. We were talking about too one of the inspirations, and I know this one may sound, actually some people may relate to this as well, but I also find music a big part of my writing. There's certain characters, just to get into their mindset, I listen to a specific type of music the whole time I'm writing for that character.
Okay.
And I think what that does is it kind of puts me in a specific place emotionally. For instance, there's this one character, has nothing to do with Novamir. This is my own personal stuff. I always listen to jazz when I'm writing that character's parts
Mhm.
because it kind of,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, there you go, like a will worker. Yeah. Actually, this one's a female character, but
Okay.
she but it gets me into the mindset for her. There's another character that I listen for when I write for him. I always listen to that electro, what do you call that? Morchiba and Portishead and those guys.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that style of music. It just fits him. And so I put on open up, listen to some music, and it's all those types of groups. And it, for some reason, it always can snap me back right into their personality as soon as I hear it. And even with some of the Nova Mirror stuff, I will pull specific music just to listen to. Like the last one I did, since a lot of it was going to be in a tavern, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to listen to tavern music for like 3 hours
Mm.
to kind of get my head in the mindset. And it worked. I was able to pull more of a feel of, what's a tavern like, what's it going to look like, what's happening in there, where these people are going to be doing when they're in there.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you, and
Mm-hmm.
I know the answer, but we're going to ask it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Is the actual build of the world?
Mm-hmm.
How do you build? I think you talked about this a little earlier. You said,
Mm-hmm.
you start where immediately where the person's at and you build outward.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could expand on what that looks like for you when you're building out your worlds. And let's like talk about Novamir specifically, just because, we're working on that together.
Mm-hmm. Let's use one of the recent ones. We can use a tip of the iceberg. I think would be a good one.
So can you first
Mhm.
explain what tip of the iceberg is? Because it
Yeah.
was very localized, so
Yes.
it's not out there to the world yet.
Tip of the Iceberg was a one shot that was written for one of our live plays.
Yeah, we
Film.
did a live play at it's called Mocha Lisa's Cafe in Clifton Park, New York. So thank you very much to Mocha Lisa's. They were a great host. And behind that story is we took the Legends of the Tabletop crew. We all ran the same exact one shot written by Jonathan. And we ran it for, I think we did 3 different tables that night, but we ran the same exact one shot for every single group. It was an awesome time. But yeah, tell us about Tip of the Iceberg.
So the way that one kind of blossomed was it actually started with the bad guy. I was thinking, okay, I want some place that's not in our main city because we haven't dealt with our main city yet. We've sort of have, but with the Pelham with the monster of Pellaway, but it was just a very small tidbit. And I know we're trying to keep the city of Glasgow a little bit under wraps still as we develop it. So I said, well, let's get one of the nearby towns and go from there. And so what started me on it was I was like, what would Tip be like? What would the people be like? And I'm thinking, what if some criminal was hiding there? And doing one of these hiding in plain sight things so that he can kind of wait till some really bad thing he does, the heat on that would die down and then he can move on. And that's where that started from. So once I had Bart and his personality came together really quick for me. In that case, since this was going to be a one shot, he was a little bit of a one-dimensional character. He's a bad guy. There's no ambiguity or anything. He's not a good person. He's a bad person. So that's where that came from. So as soon as I got that, then I got, okay, how is he going to hide? And I was thinking, how about a tavern? And then I came up with the whole idea of what the town of Tip would be, what their main exports was. And then that's where your world building starts. Because then I had to come up, well, what's the infrastructure of Tip going to be like? What is the architecture going to be? What are their main import exports? Because, this is still relatively a agrarian society that doesn't have modern technology. It's quote unquote, Lord of the Rings style, just before the Renaissance type time period for us. So all of that kind of came together slowly, but the initial seed was bad guy, and we had to capture him. And then that led to Tip, and then where is because we had where Tip was, but we never ever talked about it. We just knew where the little village was. And that gave us a specific feel for the village itself. Because remember, there are two main things that they did was lumber and fish. So I thought, man, what would it be like to step into this town? You probably get punched in the face by the smell of fish and lumber.
Mhm.
It'd be a very weird place, and everything would be covered with sawdust most of the time because of there's like 20 sawmills around the place. So and all day long you would just be hearing sawing for the most part until the evening, and you'd see tons of ships out in the bay fishing. And the closer you get to the docks, probably the smell of curing fish and among other, fishy smells would be assaulting your nose. So it would be a very colorful place to visit. Probably not the place you want to be, which made it the perfect place to hide because the only people who are in Tip is those people who want to be there are there for business, and they don't really go there for fun. It's not a tourist town, and that's eventually blossomed out from that, and that's how we got the tavern where he was staying at, what the tavern was like, and then who is the gang he's running with, and all of those again came from that small seed of I have a bad guy and people need to capture him, and they
Right.
want him alive. Uh, that's actually another good example. One of the things that I didn't do where your mind comes in is I didn't explicitly say what thing he did is the reason he's hiding. It's in there for the GM, but you kind of have to read between the lines, and you're like, don't leave it subtext, just put it in black and white.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
that does make a difference because if the afterwards I was thinking, you know what, if the DM knows, he's not going to like this guy either. I don't
Mhm.
want the DM to, or GM to have a mistake of liking this guy. And once you know what he did, which the players don't necessarily need to know, all they need to know is he needs to be captured and you're sent to capture him. And the reason the reward for bringing him alive was so high because of what his crime was. And again, all that just came from that simple nugget of capture a bad guy. I think that about covers it.
Yeah, I think that's a great explanation. And I think it's really funny because the way that you work is in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which says like you can build very small
Hmm.
and you can build your world out
Hmm.
so that as you need more pieces of the world, you can build it. So you could start in a very small town or a village that has 6 buildings, and as your adventuring party continues, they might need to go to the next town or village and work their way into maybe a city at some point, and your world keeps expanding and getting larger.
Hmm.
I remember the first time we spoke, I said, "Let's build a world." And
Hmm.
and that's just the way that my mind works. I'm like,
Yeah.
I want the entire world mapped out. I want every road named. I want 2,000 buildings per city, and I need 7 cities. I need 15 villages. I need 5 towns within each district, and I want it tomorrow. And
Which we've done.
not necessarily, the best way
Hmm.
to world build. It is most certainly a way to
Yeah.
world build. Might not be the best way if you don't have the time or the investment. And I think that's one of the really important things when we're looking at world building is what you can invest appropriately. So I mean, if you
Hmm.
have the time to build out an entire world, go right ahead. It's your world, it's your thing that you love.
Hmm.
But and a lot of DMs will say this is be completely prepared for your party to never go to 90% of the things that you've set up. And for some DMs, that's very discouraging, right? Like I
Hmm.
built this fantastic NPC. It's my favorite NPC in the world. And they're at the third bank, the third largest bank in this one specific town. And my adventuring party says, hey, we'd like to keep our money somewhere. And I give them the 3 options and they take the largest bank. And that's not where my favorite NPC works. And I am so stubborn that I will not move that NPC to the bigger bank because that's not where I created this player to be. And now you're
Yeah.
mad because you never get to have that interaction.
Yeah.
But it's funny that we think differently. And I think again, the same coin, 2 different sides.
Hmm.
I think this worked really nicely because I remember sitting down with you and us actually sketching out Glasgow, which is one of our main cities,
Hmm.
and being able to create the different districts that I had made up in my mind and being able to see them put down on paper and say, this is exactly the thing that was in my head. I mean, we have what, like 100, we have over 100 structures, but we've
Hmm.
numbered 100 of them because we were going to leave some of those structures, for the whim of a DM to do whatever they want with.
Yeah.
But having over 100 structures in a city that we're naming and putting NPCs inside of, and us, talking about doing one shots. And our one shots are, hey, this is something that actually is going on in Glasgow at the time where you could also do a campaign.
Hmm.
And so if you are down one player one day and you guys don't want to push the story forward, you can go to the local mill and ask for, whatever. And that person might say, if you could help me, I could give you this for free. And guess what? Now you have a side quest.
Yep.
There are different ways to build worlds, and no
Mhm.
way is the correct way. And
Yep.
I like being right. I will say this a lot. I enjoy being right. But this is one thing I will say. I don't think there is a right or wrong way to do it unless it's taking too much of your time, and then you're doing it the wrong way. Yeah, I want to say to you, like, thank you so much for the time that we have spent together building out Glasgow. I think we have a couple of other cities. Like, I think we started building out Belfort Keep.
Mhm.
And I know we're like looking to do Barrack Doom and Miele soon.
Mhm.
But having the time to sit, and now I have a picture in my mind of when I say trade winds is very real for me. I can think of like the city square and the market square and having all the tents up around like the main fountain and the different high-end shops that are there and the high-end taverns that are there and how you would traverse into trade winds.
Mm.
You can take the roadway, you can take the waterway. It is still connected to the sea on the western side. Like, it's so real to me. And I
I
love that because then I can go on a table and I can express that to a party.
Mhm. I think that also helps me from a writing aspect is having the map done. Actually, this is one thing that's helped me is your way. Since we have the map, now I can actually think in my head, okay, how long will it take the players to get from here, say from trade winds down the ropes end? Okay,
Yeah.
if they use the canals and they take the ferry, all right, it's going to cost them this many copper and, they're going to pass this place and this place. So it's a lot easier from a writing aspect to say, okay, if they're going from this point to this point, what's between there? And can something happen? Or, can something of interest pull the players in a different direction because they're passing by some other location? And that's been a huge help, actually, just being able to do that.
Yeah, so I mean, I if anyone is listening in the comments, you can reach out to us. Jonathan is billed out at $100 an hour, and we can absolutely build a world for you. I'm just kidding. It's $500 an hour, but
Yeah, I give you the family and friends discount.
it is such a wonderful and exciting thing to collaborate on stories, especially the one we're working for with Novamir,
Mhm.
is to sit in this space and to be able to enjoy building out a world. And most DMs are doing it by themselves, and I think that's a very difficult thing. Is
Mhm.
you normally have like your own life going on, and then you're DMing, which means you're prepping your sessions and the DM job's a hard job because you're usually the one that has to do scheduling, making sure everyone's arriving. 9 times out of 10, it's out of your own location, and
Mhm.
you got a lot going on. You have to get terrain together if you use it. If you're using music, I love a DM that will put music in on the table while we're playing. There's so much going on that like building out your own homebrew world is daunting. And so like, that's why there are pre-written scripts because
Mhm.
not everyone has the time to do that. So doing this world building with you has just been such a fun project.
Thank you. Same. I think that's one of the things we were talking about is like making this easy for someone else to pick up and go behind us. Having I think this much detail, even if some people say, "Oh, that's overkill," I
Mhm.
don't think so. I don't, and like you said, I don't think there's any right way or wrong way to do it. It's whatever works for you, and especially with us, as we really like detail, being able to have all that detail is something you can pull from later on. Like knowing that there's a specific forest to the north lets you do something later on down the line. or can end up being a foreshadowing for the players. The players go by a certain location and hear something strange because, as the DM, you've already, like you said, in that world building, we know that there's already a story in this one little spot. They just haven't discovered it yet because they haven't gone past it. I almost think of it almost like a video game, where as you explore the map, like in an open world game, you find stuff that you didn't even know was there. There was no specific, say, quest to go there. Because you were looking around and exploring, you discovered something really cool or something really strange. And I like that in building the world the way we're doing it, we could do that. If the players do decide, hey, let's go to a whole other part of the map, it's already there.
Yeah.
So they can do it.
If you want to die.
Yeah, if you want to die.
Listen, I put you in the level 1 to 5 spot. If you want to go to the 15 to 20, go right ahead.
Yeah, let's go to Zion's Desolation. That'll be fun.
Yeah, that sounds like a vacation spot.
Yeah. Who cares? Nobody's ever come back from there.
Yeah, so one last thing about world building I want to ask you about is, are the gods or the pantheons, D&D has already gods in place for you if you want to use them, or if you don't want to use them. What have you done with, I almost said Kingsway, with Novamir? What have you done with the gods of?
Well, it is the continent of Kingsway, so one of the things that actually I liked from the DM's manual is that's one of those things that's entirely up to you. And what's cool is that, Wizards of the Coast has provided you some that's there already. But in our case, we want a wholly new world. So everything's bespoke for this, for our world, including the Pantheon of Gods. And it was actually doing some research and, watching different videos. It was actually a Pointy Hat video on gods. And something he said in there resonated with me about using a small pantheon, and that idea really stuck with me as I continued doing research and stuff. For Novamir, that's what we ended up settling on as well, a very small pantheon. Am I allowed to say how many, or is that still secret?
No, I think it's fine.
Okay, so we have 6 gods that are defined. We're still in the process of,
I'm sorry, there's 7 gods. I am the 7th.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, of course.
Just kidding.
We're still in the process of defining them and their attributes and stuff, but so far we already have one character that is the Alara, the warlock, has a pact with one of the gods, and it really influences her personality because of who this specific god is. And I think those little nuggets, as well as we move on and we introduce more of them into things. I think since I had a little bit of knowledge of it, I metagamed a little bit, and the one that I sat on the table with the...
How dare you?
Yes, I know. I metagamed just a tiny bit, where I used the names of one of the gods. I don't know if you caught that.
I did, and that's why you're banned from coming back and playing on my table.
But I figured it was a little bit of flavor. No one would know except for me. And
yeah, no. Yeah. What one shot was that?
Oh, that was with the gnome. That was the...
I know. I was just trying to think of so the people listening can go back and watch.
Oh my goodness, how did I forget the name of it? The Quest for the Artifact of Anor.
There you go. So if you go watch that, you can try to figure out.
That was interesting because the amount of knowledge I have of Novamir, and you wrote that one completely. I had no input in that one just because I was sitting on the table. So
I did write that one.
Yeah, because I had to. There was no other way around it. I would have known everything, and that wouldn't have been as much fun. So that was fun to be completely surprised. And actually, you came up with a faction that I just loved after that.
Oh,
From
please
that.
tell me about the faction that I did. That's amazing. Please
Oh,
stroke my ego some more.
dude, the collectors,
A
and now,
collectors.
yeah, and now the collectors are a big part of the world.
I love the collectors. I thought that was
Yes.
a really fun like
Hmm.
wrinkle. It's not even a wrinkle. That's a
Hmm.
huge thing to put in a
Yeah.
game. And I think, speaking of you writing a lot of Novamir content,
Hmm.
it is important that like when I put you on my table, I give you stuff you haven't heard or seen.
Yeah.
So it was fun for me to DM that. Just to DM it, it was fun. But then, to have the other writer sitting on the table and I start throwing stuff out that you've never heard of before, and you're like, wait, what? And I'm like, yep, take that. It's super fun. And hopefully soon, we have that saying our fingers crossed that we can get you back up here. And I'd like for you to run some stuff for us. And then I can be the one that's like, wait a minute. I created this world. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, hopefully, and I'm looking forward to it. You're just gonna have to make a little more space for me where the DM area is, because I tend to stand up.
Oh no, it's spatial awareness.
Yeah, yeah, okay,
Spatial awareness. I say that all the time to
okay.
it, be for everyone at home and our listeners. I say spatial awareness like 30 times per episode because people are just like walking into cameras, walking into microphones, walking into
It's true.
tables, walking into walls,
Uh,
and it looks like a big space. It's not as big as you think it is.
anyway,
Yeah.
I
So the
got.
collectors. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got. We can go back to that. I was gonna say I got way off of topic with the gods we were talking
Oh
about.
yeah, no. Gods and
Uh,
collectors.
yeah. Yeah, that's one of the thing too, is we're still defining all the factions. I know one of the ones that I came up with, the Red Jacks, you ended up really liking it.
Oh yeah, I love the Red Jacks.
And
They are in Glasgow.
Glasgow, yeah. And it I mean, it's not a secret. That's where Andrea Felspar is.
Mhm.
And uh she's another character that I kind of totally fell in love with as soon as I wrote her. She has a lot of complex personality to her. She's, and like I said, you did a really good job portraying her. You had that a little bit of restraint, like you can tell she was restraining herself, like she just wanted to slap the players for being idiots. Like you really brought that across. I loved it. I was cracking up the whole time because I'm just thinking, at what point is Andrea just going to pull out her bow and turn everybody into a pincushion? That's all I was thinking the whole time.
It's funny to have this relationship with you because
Mhm.
you've created a character and I'm acting out that character. For a lot of, DMs, you
Mhm.
don't have a personal relationship with the person that writes the written books. So when they write, a story, it's not necessarily what they've envisioned that
Mhm.
the DM is playing out. I have the ability to go back to the person that wrote the story and say, how did you feel about that character? And I'm super excited that like I hope that when you come up, I have to be in Glasgow as a character on your table and have to run into her to see how you play her out.
Mhm.
Because I would love to see, the little adjustments that you would make in a character.
Mhm. Oh, I really want to write a story. I do have
And then I want to
one.
kill her.
I do have one that I ran on my table. I know the players liked it, so, and it but it does involve something you don't like, so I'm gonna have to skip that part or rewrite it a little bit
Yeah,
because
we'll
it
see.
has to do with a construct, but there's a good reason it's there. We were talking about the gods. Awesome thing about having that small pantheon, a lot easier to keep track of. Uh,
Mm.
you figure, how many gods and goddesses does the official D&D lore have at this point? There's a lot, like a lot.
I
There's
mean, so
probably,
I'm just looking up, says there's over 100 deities in
yeah.
Greyhawk setting.
Hmm.
That's the third edition. So is it from hundreds to thousands?
Yes, and that's my point. Imagine. trying to build a world and having that many, it it just gets completely chaotic, and then at that point you're just making a god for whatever you want for the story. And again, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, but I think that's from a writer, from my viewpoint I should say, I feel like it's sloppy writing, because then you're not actually using your limits that you've created for yourself. You're just kind of like throwing things around and just using it when you want it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so for us, we came up with these six different gods, and uh, one of them is very special because of the backstory of our whole world, and the other two are very directed towards what would be like the clerics on our world. It's very easy to say what they represent, what they control, and also it makes things a little easier from a writing perspective because there's less to keep track of. Instead of having, like you said, it was like 10,000 gods to pull from, it's just
Mm-hmm.
six, and it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to do. I also think this way, um, when there is interaction, it's a bigger deal with the players and or with the NPCs, because it's, they're much bigger, so to speak. They control everything. And so when one of these six interact or clash, it could be catastrophic for everybody in Novamir. And because it's such a small amount, there's a delicate balance as well. And just about anything can throw that balance off. So and their views of the mortal realm, it's like, hmm, you know, how much do they really care about anyone here? So it's, I think that's one of the things from having such a smaller pantheon. It helps with it. I think it makes the story a little easier and a little more accessible. If that kind of makes it, yeah, makes it simpler. That,
Yeah.
yeah, that works.
Yep.
Also, the the one god that we're still brainstorming a name on. We won't go into that, but it's Alara's patron. Uh, that one has been a lot of fun because of who and what he is, and
Yeah.
that's that's going to be a lot of fun when we get to deal with him. I think.
Yeah. I think the day that that God comes out it'll be changing for the world.
Yeah, it'd be quite interesting,
Mm.
and I can't wait to see how some of the real like the monks and clerics or whatnots of the other two gods, their interaction, because they're literally night and day to each other. So that's going to be a lot of fun too, is getting those people together.
Yeah, I
Yeah, I
think we
look
have a
forward
lot
to
of
it. Yeah.
things. Yeah, we have a lot of things to look forward to with
Mhm.
uh, the Novamir. Right now, we're doing it as a one shot on our YouTube channel
Mhm.
as we are working through our main campaign that is done with our regular dungeon master or game master, Alex, and his world of Arabil. So, I mean, as we're in that world, which is night and day versus Novamir,
Mhm.
so we're super enjoying that. But as other things come out and we explore Novamir a little bit more, I think there are exciting things to look forward to with with that world. So I thank you so much for taking a couple of moments out and just talking about world building.
Mhm.
Being able to look inside your head for an hour and change and see the process that you go through is enlightening, and hopefully it translates to how the DM that handles your content puts it out on the table for the world to consume. So thanks,
Yeah.
Jonathan.
Yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to sharing more of this as time goes on.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll have you up soon, and I will get you to run a Novamir one-shot for us.
Looking forward to that very much.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for the listen. We appreciate your investment in our YouTube channel. You can also find Legends of the Tabletop, there we go, on our Instagram page as well. But until then, stay legendary.